Good evening, everyone.
It's really such an honor for me to be sitting here together with Rawan, somebody who I have been observing from afar for a very long time. And as many of you, and as the rabbi just said, I know that I have felt lonely, and even people, and I keep on telling David all the time, even people that I thought were our friends, it's so saddening to see what is going on in our society, and it only feels like it's getting worse and worse. But Rawan is one of those beacons of hope, one of those lights in the darkness, and it's really such an honor to have her here with us. And I have to say that one thought that I was thinking of tonight as we were coming here is that Rawan is the product of what can be when we have dialogue, and when we can speak to one another, when we can respect each other enough to say, this is what I grew up with, this is what I was told, but I want to learn, and I want to come to the other side and hear why you feel the way you do, why you believe the way you do, because something doesn't make sense. And I know that I have always felt, and the Torah teaches, and Chassidus teaches, that the core of every single human being is goodness. And we know that everybody means well, I won't say everybody, but for the most part, most decent human beings mean well, and they want the best for humanity. But somehow, something gets lost in translation, and something just gets murky along the way. And it's when we have the courage to get up and say, this may be the way I was raised, these may be the beliefs that have been such a big part of who I am, but I want to learn more, and I want to explore and see where you come from, because there's got to be a way to bridge the divide. And I think that Rawan really personifies this. Someone who grew up with so much hatred, and we're going to let her tell the story. And she got to a point where she said, there's got to be more to this. And from her home, from her hometown and from her background, it took a lot more courage than it takes for us in America to just go over to a friend or a family member who might have a difference of opinion and try to understand their opinion. So let's start at the very beginning, Rawan. We'll start, maybe you can fill us in a little bit about your childhood and paint a little bit of a picture of what that was like. I know you grew up both in Syria and in Lebanon. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a background there.
Again, first of all, thank you for inviting me, for having me here. Thank you all for coming. With your permission, I'm going to introduce myself. Just give me 10 minutes. Then you can ask whatever you want, the audience as well. I'm going to stand so that everyone can see me. And I'm pretty sure not everybody knows me here, so I'm gonna try to be brief and to tell you where I came from and where I am today, what brought me to you. So my name is Rawan Osman. My father is Sunni from Damascus, and my mother is Shia from the Bekaa Valley. And I attended a French Catholic school for 15 years in Lebanon. I've already told you that I come from a very secular background, that religion was irrelevant in my upbringing. Otherwise, my Sunni father would not marry my Shiite mother. We would not attend a Catholic school, and we had a Christmas tree because my father thought it's the sweetest of traditions for kids. I grew up in a middle-class, liberal, educated society where people distanced themselves from religion because my mother is the daughter of the Lebanese Civil War, where the Lebanese killed one another. Everybody decided to become tolerant, to become kinder. The only thing this kind society hated was the Jews, the Israelis, and the Zionists, and I make sure I always mention those three terms because they are used interchangeably. We do not make a distinction between Jewish, Zionist, and Israeli. That is a farce. but you know. I grew up hating the Jews and the Israelis. When I sometimes choose the title of my speech as a recovered anti-Semite, my Israeli friends say, "You're better than that." No, I'm not better than that. And if we're going to find a cure to this disease, to this madness, we need to have a diagnosis. I'm a recovered anti-Semite, and when I was a teenager, the age of my young son sitting outside there, I was one of Hezbollah's biggest fans. I was one of those useful idiots you see on the streets in the West today. And it was really easy to hate the Jews and the Israelis where I grew up, because Israel occupied South Lebanon. And we liked Hezbollah because they were the only ones who were brave enough to defy the occupier. Of course, nobody told us that Israel occupied South Lebanon after 10 years of restraint, after Hezbollah, before Hezbollah, after Yasser Arafat and his gang, and leftists from around the world who came from Germany or from Japan, Red Army factions passionate for leftist members. This phenomenon you see today is not new. They joined Arafat and his gang in Lebanon, abused Lebanese hospitality, and occasionally sent terrorists inside Israel targeting Israeli civilians. And after 10 years, the Israelis decided enough is enough. And they occupied South Lebanon to create a buffer zone, something Israel is demanding until this day. I didn't know this. Only in my mid-20s, when I wanted to take a course in Europe, the natural choice was France, because it was my second language. And I landed in Strasbourg, near one of the biggest synagogues in the world, Synagogue de la Paix, and I thought it's a museum because I've never seen a synagogue. And on the very first day, I went across the street for shopping, and I was happy to find the same ingredients I needed to cook, the same spices, and I did not connect the dots because I did not know what a kosher store is. When I was buying spices, I heard men enter the store. And I was thinking in the back of my head, they're not speaking French. And it hit me, they were speaking Hebrew. How would I know? Everything we told about the Jews, we believed in Lebanon, in most of the Arab world, but I'm speaking of myself now, because there were no Jews around us to contest whatever the state tells us about the Jews. More than 850,000 Jews were uprooted from the so-called Arab world. Remember when I told you Israel occupied South Lebanon? Back in my days, we had 3 TV channels, and we had a television that had an antenna. We needed to adjust to get a better signal. And we were allowed to watch 20 minutes of cartoon in the afternoon. When you adjust the antennas, if all you got was biblical cartoon from Israel, we watched it. If a grown-up walked into the room, they would freak out because you're watching Israeli TV. And on that afternoon, in my mid-20s in Strasbourg, France, I realized that even the language was associated with taboo. Because when I turned and I saw 4 religious men dressed in black and white and hats, you know, religious Jews, I had my first and last panic attack. I did not know what a panic attack is, but I left my shopping in the trolley and my belongings, my bag, and I ran out of the store, did not look left and right, crossed the street, went up to the 3rd floor and locked my bedroom door. And I couldn't breathe. When I looked at the mirror and I saw how red and sweaty I was, I felt embarrassed. I felt like a fool. And then I thought that was stupid because I left my stuff in the store. I now had to go back and explain what happened, but I decided to lie to the storekeeper. I decided to say that I forgot my wallet. And that's what I've done. The man had left. And I pretended nothing happened, continued shopping, went to pay. The man asked me, where do you come from? And I thought, fantastic, now it's his turn to have a panic attack. So I was vague. I said, from the Middle East. And he insisted, where from? So I told him, I'm half Syrian, half Lebanese. And he was pleasant. He asked me how long I've been in Strasbourg. I told him I just arrived. He knew that I was lying. I could tell from his smile. He understood what happened. And he was so kind, he allowed me to save face. And by allowing me to save face, that gentleman on that day converted me from an enemy to an ally just by being kind. He did not know on that afternoon that by doing so, he was allowing me into the space of the enemy. He did not know that years later, that story happened in 2011. Years later, I will become one of the loudest advocates of Israel. He didn't mean it, but I tell you this story because I love it, and to remind you that even our smallest actions have a ripple effect in the universe. You don't have to cash it immediately, you don't have to know. But a small act of kindness changed the trajectory of my life. And for weeks, I sat down on the windowsill. I was in a very big house, an old, beautiful house. I sat down on the wide windowsill, spying on the Jews, thinking, they look normal to me. The children are well behaved, the elderly are looked after, and why do women dress like the Muslims? I didn't know anything about them. Some covered their hair, wore long dresses. I thought maybe the bad Jews are the ones who lived in Israel. Those ones seemed just fine. And I wondered why my body reacted that way at the grocery store. And it was so simple. I realized that it was the first time in my life to share the same space with the Jew, with the enemy. That was my reaction. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself, why is the Jew my enemy? Only to understand that my entire perception of the Jews and Israel Zionism was shaped by the one and only former Secretary General of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, who died recently, not of old age. So it made sense for me to understand why is he so obsessed with Israel. And he always quoted Haaretz. It's something I even told the Israeli president. Obsessed with Haaretz. And I discovered something I thought was secret. I found an old video in black and white where Hassan Nasrallah says, we in Hezbollah do not acknowledge political borders. We would like Lebanon to become part of the Islamic Republic of Iran. They wanted an Islamic state. Who wanted an Islamic state recently? ISIS. But the one Hassan Nasrallah wanted is a Shiite one. And I immediately realized I did not subscribe to this agenda. Do people know? Of course people knew because Hezbollah's manifesto was published in the early 80s in the Lebanese newspapers. People knew. For me, it was news. That happened in 2018, and in 2011, it took me years of reading. It was an epiphany, it changed my life, but it took me years to detox from the intensive indoctrination to understand the reason behind the Middle East conflict. And only in 2018, when my son was 8, I went back to Strasbourg, I showed him the house where I lived, I showed him the store, and I wanted to tell the storekeeper how it changed my life. But unfortunately, it's no longer a kosher store. Now it's part of a French chain. And it was the first time, imagine after 7 years, that I dared ask to visit the synagogue. That I trusted myself enough to say, I want to see what's inside the synagogue. And I always included my son, even if that requires translation, for him to understand why I never taught him Arabic. To understand how toxic, how contaminated our culture is. If I said this, and I do, at university campuses, many Arabs and Muslims are offended. And I tell them, hold on a second. Why did you emigrate? Why do you live here? Why didn't your parents go to Saudi Arabia? That is to say, as human beings, we are all equal. We have equal rights, but we also have equal responsibilities. We are equal human beings. Cultures are not equal. This is why I dare say that what I understood after that incident in Strasbourg is that our side is the aggressor. We always blame Israel because it's convenient. Instead of looking in the mirror, it's easier to scapegoat the Israelis and the Jews. This is a very short story of how my life changed, my perception changed. Now the layers you'd like me to reveal, that's up to you. Shoot, the mic is yours. What do you have on your heart? What would you like to ask? Go ahead.
Well, I think you left us on a cliffhanger over there. I think. So the first time that you met Jewish people was in that supermarket, but clearly that was not the end of your journey. So you sat and you watched Jewish people, and I know, and I'm not sure if everybody here knows, but Rawan is actually in the process of converting to Judaism. Wow. And
you did not know? Now you know.
And so clearly there was a lot more to that. Maybe I should have saved that for later.
We can fix it.
But you eventually went to visit Israel and realized that it wasn't just the Jews in France, but the Jews in Israel seem to be pretty decent human beings too, I think.
After what happened in France, I started reading about the history of our region. And I realized that thousands of lives could have been spared had the Arabs accepted to share the land. Not only the side I grew up on are the aggressors, they have a strange sense of entitlement. It is ours. It is our land. We will not share it. At school, around the time you're 12 or 13 in Lebanon, and we have one curriculum, one official curriculum, whether you go to a private or to a public school, we are told the story of Palestine. And it's only 3 pages. The antagonist is Theodor Herzl. Everybody knows him in the Arab world. And he invented Zionism. You learn the date of the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. And his plan was to bring the Jews, who come from Eastern Europe, to come and take Palestine, therefore the Palestinians suffer, etc. There are many problems to this story, but I think the biggest, now in my age as a mother, the biggest problem with this story is that as a child, you internalize that Palestine was a country, which never was. When I started reading, I was filled with anger because we were lied to. And this is not a benign lie. It led to the death, and I say thousands, tens of thousands, because even those who died under the Assad regime, even the Iranians who were killed, even the Arabs of Palestine who call themselves Palestinians, all of those lives, as well as the Israelis, are lost in vain because of a narrative, because of a lie, a made-up cause. So I realized we are lied to. I started reading about our history, and I was so frustrated. Nobody in the Arab world, and I lived in 4 different countries, so when I say anti-Semitism is rampant in the Arab world, I'm not generalizing. I know what I'm talking about. I lived in Lebanon, Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. I thought I could share my discoveries, but the problem is so complex. The propaganda is so intensive, people can't be bothered. Just leave it, the poor Palestinians. You just learned that they are the underdog, and the decent thing to do is to support them. So I decided to leave. I went to Europe, and I've been living in Germany for almost 13 years now. That's very, very interesting. I had to cover every chapter of anti-Semitism. I would not be the same person I am had I not lived in Germany. I bought my copy of Mein Kampf, Hitler's Mein Kampf, for less than $1 in Damascus, in Arabic. I bought my copy of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion for less than $1 in Damascus, and you find it in every Arab capital. And then I went to Germany, and because of my background, anti-Semitism is criminalized in Germany. They're serious about it. You can't go to a demonstration with a swastika, you land in jail. Still, because of my background, Germans feel comfortable to share their thoughts. Not all Germans, but many are still Nazis at heart.
Wow.
So I had to see all this. I had to see with my own eyes what Nazi Germany did to the Jews in Europe. And it's not true that I understood that even the Jews in Israel are normal people as well. Because I worked for years with Jews, with Americans and Israelis, and we took Arab delegations of professionals, journalists, academics, people who live in the Arab world, especially after the signing of the Abraham Accords, but also Arabs who live abroad. We took them for a week, Holocaust education, so mostly to Poland. And my condition to work on those projects was, if you find enough money to bring a delegation for a week to Poland, you have to have enough money, find the budget to take those professionals to Israel for a week. It's a free holiday, but from my perspective, it's not enough to take the Arabs to Auschwitz and show them, look at what happened to the poor Jew. Pity the Jew and tolerate the Jew in the Middle East. The Jew is no longer asking for your permission. Take them to Israel and the country itself will command everybody's respect. So I knew that the Israelis are normal people too, but soft diplomacy is what most of the Jews, especially in the USA, where most donors are, thought is the most effective way to build bridges between communities, which is true, but they lacked the sense of urgency. This was not enough. And I was saying, while we're building important bridges after the historic signing of the Abraham Accord, we're building a new alliance, and we're offering an alternative vision for the future generations in Israel. There is another evil alliance, the so-called axis of resistance, which resists Israel's very existence, which resists modernity, and they are in the process of destroying, obliterating every bridge we build. People lack the sense of urgency, and we saw what happened on October 7th. This was for me a turning point. I was a recovered anti-Semite. I even decided to convert to Judaism before October 7th, and if you like, I'll tell you that story. I realized that if people lack the sense of urgency, I had the responsibility to urge them, and I didn't do enough. As far as I was concerned, now was the point where we had to switch. I personally did switch to fighter mode. It is not a war we wanted. And it's not a fight that is fun, entertaining, exciting. It is miserable, we're all broken-hearted, but they waged a war that is meant to be the final war against Israel. It's meant to drain the country economically, psychologically, People are tired, and it is normal, and they're betting on it. They will keep the hostages as long as they can. They don't care if every Gazan dies. They want the Israeli economy to crumble, and they want the leftists to become more and more aggressive. They want their children to leave the country, and then they will hit you again and again. They have plenty of time because they believe in the afterlife. This was my bit after October 7th. I did not go to Israel and I discovered, wow, they're nice people after all. I knew Israel was my home, and I knew those were my people. But I also understood after October 7th that if I truly think they are my people, if I truly think they are family, now they need to be shaken, needed a kick in the tuchus to understand what more
Very important Jewish word.
and chutzpah, especially in Israel. They need to understand what happened on October 7th reminded us of what the Torah told you. Evil is objective. It exists. So allow me, if I may, I disagree with the notion that we're all born good. We're all born human beings, and we need to tame the evil inside us. This is why we pray. This is why we have to work on ourselves. We can all surprise ourselves, God forbid, if you're left with nothing. If one of your loved ones is tortured, we can surprise ourselves. So it's not true that we're all born pure good. And our enemies are displaying pure evil. This is why we need to fight it. I'm not saying all of you should carry guns, but sometimes even kindness is a form of fighting. And we need a lot of that. Because as you know, we are dramatically outnumbered. And each one of us needs to roll their sleeves up and get to work in whichever capacity. And I do believe if my message resonates, I'm pretty sure each one of us are contributing their bit one way or another.
The only thing I would say about that is that I think that kindness and goodness are learned traits. And I think that every child has the capability and the ability to see the good in others. I think actually children very much are that way. If you go into a preschool, you go into a kindergarten, they don't notice what adults notice. They don't see our differences. They just see their commonalities. And I think that evil and all these, and as you described, it's very, very much an educational thing. Children are taught to hate. Adults are taught to hate. And I think that with enough education, or at least this is my hope and my prayer, is that with enough education, we can hopefully turn the tide and see the world become a better place. So that's my dream, but it might be a dream. You can see and want me dream. I'm a dreamer. But I think that you have an incredibly unique position as an influencer. You know, you see a lot of, thankfully we do have some great influencers on the social media space, but what makes you unique is that you come from those neighborhoods. And you can say, I've been there, I grew up there, I know what it's like, and I am telling you that this is what's going on and this is what needs to change. So you have a very, very unique perspective that most of us don't. We talk about what's going on in these places, but we can't actually prove that because we don't know. We didn't grow up in the way that you did. And I think that the way you take your platform and to me what seems so fearless, to really go out there and speak the way you do can seem very, very scary, especially in the culture that you come from. I am sure that it's not easy for you to speak up for the Jew and speak maybe not so up for the people that you grew up with. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
Fearless indeed. I do not get intimidated, and I'm not making an effort. I know that I'm doing what I was meant to do. And I'm going to share something intimate, and I'm risking that you question my sanity now. I truly believe that before I was born, I chose to be born on the other side of the fence. I truly never felt at home, and I was just observing and thinking, what's wrong with this culture? Why are they the way they are? Why? Not everyone. There are lovely people, but the biggest percentage of the society is deranged. There's something wrong. There's such hatred and jealousy. I believe I was born on the other side of the fence to learn their tongue and their ways. I didn't know why. On October 7th, I understood why. So I'm not intimidated, and it's really funny that people call me an influencer now. I'm one of the accidental activists. Until October 7th, I had Facebook. That's our age. We connected on Facebook. But out of anger, the same anger I still feel until this day, I volunteered, I reached out to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel, and I said, send the videos my way. I'll translate them. And they told me, no, it's horrific. You can't. I said, I have thick skin. I know what I'm talking, just send it my way. The anger I felt back then is the same anger I feel now. And I told my friends at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, how many years I've been telling you, Arabic must be mandatory in Israel. And sometimes I say this to Israelis, and they say I'm not interested in the peacemaking mumbo-jumbo. And I tell them, it's your survival. As a mother, I'm not telling you anything graphic. I'm going to tell you a story, a video that I watched on October 8th. A child, I'm guessing he's 9, blonde, kidnapped from Israel. He speaks Hebrew. And there's a man, a grown man, telling him in Arabic, and the boy doesn't understand. He's telling him, do you miss your mom? Do you want your mom? Call for your mom. And the boy doesn't understand what the man is saying. And behind the boy, there were 2 smaller boys, maybe 6 and 7. And they were poking the boy, hitting the boy, even poking him with a stick. And the boy is so confused. And imagine, eventually the boy says, Ima. He understood. They're saying something about his mom, Ima. And I have even now goosebumps. This made me so angry with the Israelis, because his family doesn't understand. Like, people, give me context. Where is my son? In Iran? In Gaza? In the West Bank? Where is my son? This is why it was very important that they learn Arabic, and they were overwhelmed. This is how people got involved. Let me translate the videos. And out of anger, I started posting on social media. I studied Jewish studies at Heidelberg University in Germany. And my professor asked us to write a paper on Hamas's self-representation post-October 7th in the media. This is how I learned how important social media is. This is how I became an influencer. It is scary how well prepared they were. An example that you will never forget, just to illustrate how well prepared they were. The first university encampment happened on October 8, 2023 at Stanford University. A Stanford student in San Francisco told me, I could not believe my ears. I did not know, although I follow every day. So it's not random that you see the encampments. They all have similar tents. They have the banners prepared. Anyhow, seeing how well prepared they were on social media, how intensive the campaigns were, I started recording and posting. So my son always said, you're a dinosaur on social media. This is embarrassing. Don't post. What do you mean TikTok? Because I asked him to download. He's like, no, Mom, please, no. And I started getting hundreds of followers and then thousands, and it confused my son. Why are they following you? I didn't know how to use the tools And it's a very complicated world. After I learned, I worked with a team of 9 social media strategists who taught me how to use every platform. At the beginning, I posted without using a mic, without using light. I couldn't care less. I just wanted my message across, especially when you see the hypocrisy of the Arab world. When you watch the news in the Arab world, and it's so clear that they're using the Gazans as human shields. I never felt scared, and at the beginning I received a lot of death threats. I don't anymore. The idea was to intimidate you, especially when you are a woman. They're graphic, they are rude, they are vile. But I grew up in the Middle East, honey, I have thick skin, so you just brush it off, continue, and I hope this would inspire others. They're good at barking. That said, I'm not suicidal. When I go to universities, especially in Europe, ironically, I have 8 bodyguards.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And I have a criminal investigator in Germany I report to, because I want my son safe. And he told me, ma'am, those who want to kill you will not give you notice. They will not tell you. So of course I implemented measures in my life, but I know that it's a lot of talking. And if you push, let me say it differently. What the game today is quantity versus quality. We are dramatically outnumbered, but we have quality. And creativity and innovation will help Israel prevail, and it will. B'ezrat Hashem, I know it the same way I know that I can see you now. It's gonna get, and I keep saying this since October 7th, because it is meant a final war against Israel, things will keep getting worse, and it will get worse, unfortunately, until it gets better once and for all. If you sign a deal with Hamas, you disrespect, you dishonor the so many lost lives, you owe it to the future generation to ensure that this ideology is eradicated. It does not happen overnight, but eventually, and this is happening, they have to go on their knees, disarm, and beg to go to prison. And only then their families will be allowed to leave Gaza, because there is no going back to October 6th. I'm not saying this because I'm a bigot. I grew up in war. I know what it's like, and wars with Israel. I know what it's like to be a child, and you can tell when the Israeli Air Force is flying above your house. And you hear the rockets, and the house shakes. I know that children do not choose to be born in Gaza. But I also know that the so-called Palestinians had so many opportunities, and they wasted all of them because they always wanted more. They always thought they can achieve more. On October 7th, the Palestinian cause was liquidated. They don't know it yet. They think it's become a trend. It was liquidated. They opted for terror again. And they've proved something that the world will realize later. The so-called Palestinians were never able to build a Palestine because their leadership was always a terrorist leadership or a corrupt one, or both. They've proven again after October 7th that they are not fit for governing, and they're not safe for their own children. It's about time we draw the line and we say, Maspik kvar. Enough is enough. The Palestinian cause is over. I don't care how many countries recognize Palestine. It was fictional. It will always be fictional.
Here in this room, you're definitely among friends, but you started a very important, I don't know if it's an organization, but a movement, I want to say, called Arabs Ask. which I think is extremely important because most of us here agree with everything that you say, and it's refreshing to hear somebody like you speak that way. But for a lot of your audience, what you say is they're hearing things for the very first time. You're really opening their eyes, and I think it's the future. It's really what our future holds, and I'd love for you to share about that.
To be honest, most of my followers are Zionists who give me a pat on the back.
Right.
But I do have a large following among Arabs. Many of them wish me dead, but many agree with me. And very often, in Miami, in Philadelphia, in McGill in Canada, Toronto, Montreal, in Panama, in Holland, in London, I'm always surprised when Arabs approach me and the bodyguards circle me. And I tell them, no, friendly crowd. There are those who always share that they were anti-Semitic as well, and they changed their mind because of my videos or because of the videos of another Arab who started posting after October 7th. They tell me stories about how they changed the minds of their mothers, of their fathers, how they recovered their lost friendships with Jewish friends after October 7th because they understood that propaganda turned them into anti-Semites. That is to say that, yes, posting in Arabic or in English and providing Arabic subtitles is important. And we are now creating something bigger than Arabs ask, and I'll explain in a second. But I learned after October 7th that when I speak to Jewish crowds, and often there's someone in the crowd who say, you're preaching to the converted. No, when I speak to Jewish crowds, I'm not wasting energy. I understood that we do need to mobilize our own troops a lot, especially among the youngsters, are gaslit and confused. A young student, I don't remember, I think in Boston somewhere, she cried. A university student told me, if Israel didn't exist, October 7th would never happen. And she's crying. And I told her, honey, Israel exists because October 7th happened. You need to learn your Jewish history. And in Boston, in a massive, massive show, I spoke, and a lady, very sweet, she told me, you shouldn't be speaking to us. You should be speaking in mosques. And I told her, what do you expect us to do? What can we do? Teach your children your Jewish history.
Which actually brings me right back. I wanted to go back to what you said in the beginning of how, the Arabs don't differentiate between Jews, Israelis, and Zionism. And I think that's such an important point because I think even Jews sometimes make that distinction, and that's very dangerous waters, and especially knowing that we know now that you are in the process of converting to Judaism. And initially you said how religion didn't really take any part in your life, and clearly the fact that you are converting, it's not just being an advocate. This is really taking on a real part of your identity. So how do you reconcile all of that?
I'm going to tell you about my conversion, but first let me go back to Arabs. Last year, in May, I was invited as part of a European female delegation. I was the only activist, the others were parliamentarians, diplomats, and we were invited to speak at the Knesset, and the topic was sexual violence as a weapon of war. And it wasn't a one-time event. Now in November we're going to speak at the French Parliament. And my speech was very powerful because I was very emotional. All I was thinking about when I was waiting for my turn is that I grew up on the other side. I never in my life imagined having the honor to address the Israelis at the Knesset. And I must be the only one who was given more than 3 minutes. I spoke for 8 minutes, and they asked for my speech, and I said no. if you want me to speak, I'm not sharing my speech. It's a surprise. Because I wanted to tell the Israelis, I think we were invited by the opposition. And I spoke about what the topic of the meeting, but then I said, because I knew it was broadcasted, I wanted to remind the Israelis that even your worst political opponent, remember, your worst political opponent in Israel would never kill your son or rape your daughter. You want to kill each other, you want to fight, do it behind closed doors. Because everybody in the world is exploiting your division. When that happened, and it was a very, very emotional speech, at the end, people were emotional, people were crying, and a member of the Knesset told me, wow, I want to look around you. Look what you did in the room. Thank you so much. And I told her, Tal, and it's still on YouTube, Tal, don't thank me. If the same happened to our women and children, I expect you to reciprocate what I'm doing. I said this, but I never imagined that a year later, I was indeed in Israel at the Knesset, speaking about what happened to the Alawites and to the Druze. Until now, the numbers of victims are in the thousands. And last week, I took a Syrian delegation to Geneva. I took them to speak to diplomats and to hold a press conference to talk about what happened in Sweden, in Syria in general, and the fact that the school guide who was a member of Al-Qaeda is now leading Syrian. Everybody's shaking his hand. I took them to the Israeli ambassador as well. And for most of them, and they are representatives of various minorities in Syria, for most of them it was the first time they sat with an Israeli. And they were surprised with how humble, how kind and understanding he is, that he could speak broken Arabic. We are rewriting history. We are changing the course of events. And we can. And with women, especially women. We met many diplomatic missions, but we met the Dutch. And they were very enthusiastic, willing to finance an organization that is much bigger than what I'm doing on social media, to bring women, the Yazidis, to remind the world that they were even 8-year-old girls sold as sex slaves. Bring the Yazidis, bring the Copts from Egypt, bring the Maronites from Lebanon, also the Druze and the Alawites and the Israelis. Bring them all, build a political front, and push against this tide of jihadism. This is what applies to Hamas. And neo-jihadism, which is a phenomenon that's starting in Syria now. So we can change the world. We just have to believe that our small actions have a ripple effect in the universe. And now to my conversion. I decided to convert before October 7th, but nobody knew about it because I was an atheist all my life. And I raised my son an atheist. I grew up between Muslims and Christians who tell you the Muslims are lying, and the Christians, and the Muslims say the Christians are lying. So I think as a child, I concluded they were both lying, or maybe, in retrospect, I did not want to take sides, because they were all my friends and family. Also, the story they tell about the Creator is slightly simplistic. It's like Santa in the sky watching you, and he'll burn you forever if you're a bad kid, and you go to paradise if you're good. I never bought into that. When, after living in Germany for 13 years, millions of Muslims were invited into the continent, and I've been watching how the continent transformed. First, I thought, especially after ISIS stroke in Paris, in London, I thought we need to go further. Maybe Canada, because the weather is terrible, they won't come. Or go to New Zealand, because they have earthquakes. So I called friends, and they said, no, it's the same everywhere. So I realized the Middle East is part of who I am. I cannot divorce it and just take my son and leave. And we do have a moral obligation for those who can't afford leaving. So I decided to solve the Middle East problem. And to do that, I had to go back to university and study Islamic studies from a neutral academic perspective to understand what do the Muslims want. And I had to study Jewish studies to understand what do the Jews want. Because until then, I always equated Judaism, Christianity, and Islam because the Christians and the Muslims said that we are an extension, we are the updated version of Judaism, which I learned is not accurate. And at the beginning of my studies, of the Jewish studies, we took a course called What is Judaism? It barely scratches the surface. It's not designed for Jews, it's designed mostly for non-Jews to demystify Judaism, like nobody drinks blood over Shabbat. That's crazy. We had an Orthodox rabbi, Swedish, about to retire, and he was the funniest character, and he was wise. And during this class, I realized that I was Jewish, which is crazy. I used to look at the mirror and think, yeah, you're losing your mind. But it was such an overwhelming feeling, it was the truth. So at the end of the course, I had lunch with Shaul, and I told him, Shaul, I'm Jewish. And he choked on his food. He's like, what? Come again. I told him I am going to convert, Orthodox. I ridiculed these rituals all my life. And in your class, Shaul, I realized that it is those traditions that helped preserve the essence of Judaism throughout millennia. And to honor that, I'm going to convert Orthodox. And I'm going to make Aliyah, because Israel is my home. I've never been to Israel. He thought, you go there, you see the traffic, they can't stand it like you'll change your mind. Shaul, if you'd like to be part of my journey, you're welcome. And he said, this is not how you pitch converting to a rabbi. You have to beg me, convince me, and I should resist. Anyway, it never happened. No rabbi tried to sway me, to tell me, we like you as you are, because they know that I know what I'm doing. I'm going home. And I realized in that class, and this was the overwhelming feeling, that I lived in 7 countries. I landed in the Jewish Quarter in Strasbourg. I worked in the Jewish Quarter in Damascus in my early 20s. I had so many coincidences that always transformed my life or changed the trajectory. And I always dismissed those crazy coincidences because spirituality is beneath me. I'm a rational person. In that class, I realized that I was so lucky. Hashem was using those coincidences as pebbles to show me the way back home. And it was such an overwhelming feeling. At my age, I know that there's nothing for free in life. And when someone bestows such a gift upon you, how do you give back? And only on October 7th, I understood what I was supposed to do with the light of Judaism, not to use a cliche. Why is it a light? It's not a diamond, it's not gold, it's light. You cannot contain it. It's not yours, you can't keep it in your pocket. It's the light. And at a certain point, our ancestors accepted the mission to be a light unto nations, because it's not exclusively yours. It's not yours to monopolize. It's a mission. And it comes at a cost. And our ancestors accepted it. And now, because it's our lifetime, I think in every generation, there is this now. There is the moment that reminds you of your mission. This was my moment, and probably yours, watching what we're going through collectively. And I dare say ours, because after after I decided to convert, I took a DNA test because of the Israelis. They kept telling me, you have a Jewish neshama. You have a Jewish neshama. What does that mean? Take a DNA test. And of course, when I took a DNA test, my blood tells the story of the Middle East, layers of history. This is why I say our ancestors accepted the mission. What changed in their lives, I don't know. But once you realize what your mission is, you have the responsibility to embrace it. And this is what makes me fearless, because I know that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, and I will do it as long as I'm supposed to do it. And on that note, it is a thank you. You can continue as long as you want to here.
I think that what Rawan just said was so powerful about each of us having our moment. About each of us having our moment. And unfortunately, I think for a lot of us as Jews, October 7th was our moment. For you, you had your moment, you said it was before October 7th. For a lot of us, it was a wake-up call. And unfortunately, it takes sometimes some really, really big things to happen in order for us to, Mickey, just hold it for just 1 second. Just my brain can't function with the noise in it. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes something, a really, really big event to wake us up. And for a lot of Jews, that's when a lot of men started putting on tefillin, a lot of women started lighting Shabbos candles, there was a big Jewish awakening. People coming to shul, people starting to really connect with their Judaism. And I love how you said, teach your children of what it means to be Jewish. We actually were listening to a podcast recently where this guy was saying, Jewish people today will go to great lengths to give their children Jewish pride other than practice. They'll do anything else other than practice. And how important it is for us to realize that we feel hated, we feel isolated, know what it means to be a Jew. Know what it means to be a proud Jew, because it's the proud Jews. It's by being proud, by knowing what our Judaism is, that we will come up on top. And as you say, hopefully the worst is pretty close to the end, and we're getting ready for the better. And thankfully we have so many beautiful people who are ready to, we're ready for the good, we're ready, we're proud, we're feeling our Judaism. We don't need it to get worse, we don't need to be squeezed anymore, because we're ready to see the bright side, the good side, the victory, the Jewish people united as one, loving each other unconditionally in the promised land. So I'll let you have the last word, Rawan.
I think that Hashem has a plan. And what happened since October 7th has transformed Jews around the globe, and sane Gentiles as well. And what you said is really interesting about people reconnecting. But I do understand that some are not yet ready to reconnect with Judaism, but they definitely all reconnected with their Jewishness. And when I said that I knew on October 7th what I had to do, I simply shared with the world that I'm converting to Judaism. And social media strategists who taught me how to use social media, including religious Jews wearing kippahs, said, no, we're not going to tell anybody that you're converting to Judaism. You want to take the Magen David off? You're supposed to be our ally from their side. And I told them, including many rabbis, you are missing the point, especially after October 7th. I'm here to tell you, you are a Jew, you have a spine, use it. I'm proud to convert to Judaism. It is not my dirty secret. There is nothing wrong with Judaism. And it is very important to tell young Jews, there's nothing wrong with you and everything wrong with the world. And no, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not not one of them, but I like them, they're cool. I am proud, it is my privilege. I don't care if 50 million think we enjoy killing babies. This is nonsense. We know it's nonsense. They're almost winning at times by taking our own children from us. You have your son, your daughter, your grandson, your cousin saying, but Israel is committing war crimes. Do what I've done with my son. Take them to Israel. Every time he challenges me, come, let me show you. It will be fine, even if it looks like it's all doom and gloom. I know it in my heart. You need to believe it, and we'll remind each other how the world will transform. And you are Jewish, you know that. In 1945, a Jew sitting in a death camp, in 1945, before the war ended, if you told them 3 years later, Israel will become the first Jewish state, would they believe it? And yet it happened. Israel is a miracle. And as long as it exists, you should never feel fear, no matter what happened around the world. Thank you.
Rawan Osman, thank you so much for being here. Please join us for dessert.